Okay, so great. Looks like we have female participants live right now to start ahead of the session. All right, so by the way, good evening, everyone. This is Suraj on the other side. I am the course director and co-founder and CEO at Decibels Lab. I take care of activities of engagement to create courses, create content with the team members, and also I ensure our learners on the platform at Decibels will have best learning content to learn. So today on this session of career opportunities for battery management systems, or career opportunities in the areas of battery management system, I personally intended to talk about what opportunities engineers have to explore with various areas of battery management systems. So to make this happen, I'm here. I'd like to have this session more interactive with all of you. If you have any questions who are in the Zoom meeting here today, you could definitely write me down the questions. So if you guys are on the YouTube live as well, you can write me the questions there on the chat box. Anything to my knowledge, I would be very happy to give you inputs and answers in place. So if you just check and switch back to the screen here to see if there's any questions right now on the YouTube in case there are any. Cool. So let's get started. I believe I am audible to all of you. Just confirm if my audio is good for all of you. You could just type in yes or no on your chat box. That would be really easy and great for me to just confirm that you're able to hear me. When I on the YouTube. Okay, so cool. Perfect. It's all good. Great. So by the way, let's get started. The whole discussion. So I don't have any hard deck presentations to kind of give a GAN about all things on EV, but we would just try to talk more about career opportunities in battery management systems itself as in focus. So to make this happen, first let me kind of bring up some screens to you to show what all we're talking today in terms of jobs in the EV industry or in the specifically battery management industry. All right. So to begin ahead with, let me bring up some job roles that have been posted in a very recent days, and this has been not more than about a few days that has been posted by Lucas TVS. All right. And if you see here that there is a job role and responsibility which says that responsible to develop application software, right? By BMS core algorithm development for SOC, SOH, concepts such as cell balancing, BMS model-based development using MATLAB to auto code generation, also about battery cell plant model development as well. And on top of it, accountable to perform all phases of software and hardware development product lifecycle, such as requirements, design, coding, and implementation part of it, right? So it also talks about collaboration and validation of algorithms that are developed at system level with the firmware development team for software integration and validation, correct? So if you first talk from here, there is something called as an application software, right? So where basically you have all your algorithm that sits on in application software. But when you talk about, there is another level where it's something like a firmware development team, which helps us to make the application software talk to microcontroller, all right? So talk to all the peripherals in place. So this is all in place, and then we have integration engineering and validation engineering as well in the further parts of it. So they also talk about the process through a V cycle of product development. V cycle is a typical standard that has been followed for the product development in embedded hardware and software industry. I would typically call it as an automotive electronics in terms of V cycle development. So they would like to know, how do you start from requirement analysis, right? So if you might have not heard about requirement analysis, that itself is a very, very big responsibility. There are many engineers who just take care of requirement analysis. Okay, so what exactly happens in requirement analysis is let's say you're a tier one supplier like Bosch, and Mahindra would come up with a requirement document telling that, okay, hey, we want to develop a battery management system. But they would not just definitely tell like, okay, we would just want to make a battery development, battery management system. They would definitely come up with a lot of big documentation stuff to tell that, okay, this is all the functions, features, and all blah, blah stuff that we want inside that whole BMS to function. They want it to be this many cells. It has to work with this much of current rating. It should have X and Y and Z parameters of estimation. It should have passive balancing or active balancing. It should have being able to perform calibrations. It should have a CAN. It should have specific, controller level architecture. Many things. It should have this integration options with respect to different components as well. Maybe it should talk to VCU and all these things. It's a huge set of documentation, right? So that an OEM would pass it on to Bosch. So, but the guys at Bosch are like, somebody like Continental, Delphi, Denso, and all these people. So they have to convert that document into the complete development documentation that they would be able to delegate that amount of inputs to basically the engineering team. Okay, there is an engineering that takes place on the hardware side. There's an engineering that takes place on the software side, right? So basically, that documentation of the requirement would basically derive into each activity of development, and then also in the phase of testing as well, right? So when all of these things are happening, basically, there has to be many people who just work in the areas of requirement analysis itself, all right? So there are many different toolboxes that are used, such as IBM doors, all right? So that's things that are happening in the areas of requirement analysis. So there is also the functional and bench level testing. They're talking about mill model in the loop, SIL software in the loop, hill hardware in the loop. Right, so obviously they have repeated some of the words about MATLAB, auto code generation back again here in terms of MATLAB, Simulink, Stateflow, Simscape, embedded C, auto code generation, auto code embedded coder, and a target link toolboxes as well. Right, so apart from these as very core technical skill sets, they're also trying to ask you with functional safety ISO 26262, and also there are some Indian automotive industry standards, European industry standards, and ISO standards as well. So when you see through this kind of profile, right? So what do you see? So one is core of algorithm development, right? So somebody want to write SOC, SOH, and SSL balancing algorithms as well. So we'll talk about SOC. So it's like a core of engineering that happens in SOC or any of the algorithm development. So nowadays, if you see hardware of the battery management system are possibly available with development board concepts and stuff like that. But when you talk about algorithm, that is where a lot of patenting is happening in the areas of battery management system. So what exactly happens in the algorithm? So basically, if you're able to write algorithm that can take the best out of the battery, right? That take the most out of the battery, that means your algorithm are fantastic, right? That is on the utilization of energy, because let's say you have 2500 mAh of stored capacity inside a cell, right? So you want to use as much as possible out of the energy from that cell, right? If your SOC algorithm is not able to exactly show or estimate the amount of energy that is there inside a cell, that means you may have still energy left, but you're not able to extract the energy out of the cell, right? And SOH is a derivative parameter, which is kind of giving us a prediction that what is the condition of the battery. Depending upon that state condition of the battery, what can be actually the utilization parameters of the battery as well. Like in similar, we have SOP, state of power estimation, and various different parameters as well like that. So that is where a lot of mathematics is involved, right? A lot of algorithms are involved, and a lot of scope for areas of machine learning, scope for areas of AI. And also somebody should have a very good fundamental knowledge in terms of batteries as well, and electrochemistry as well. So if this itself is a very core area of engineering, right? So that is where people are working to create proprietary algorithms that sits inside the battery management system. If you simply take an SOC, so you could just go ahead with Coulomb counting, or like open circuit voltage based or an OCV based estimation of SOC, or it's Coulomb counting, or it is maybe something like Kalman filter based SOC estimation, or even advanced level of SOC estimation. But the problem is that SOC is being impacted at various different influencing parameters. So that's where you require exposure if you want to work in the areas of battery management system. You have to have a very good fundamentals of chemistry. You should have a very good fundamentals of mathematics. You should have a very good fundamentals of algorithm development on the side of either embedded C or I think a lot of people today do not use embedded C, but a lot of them would directly go and use MATLAB toolboxes and stuff like that, because you could basically generate a code, generate your model and validate your model. Like that's what your mill is basically, right? Model in the loop. And then you could generate your code, and then you can also perform software in the loop. And then you can also perform something called a processor in the loop, that is basically pill and then hill, hardware in the loop itself. So basically, like that is where you could write your algorithms in C, or you could use open source toolboxes like Octave and stuff like that, or Python as well, right? So, but end of the day, it has to be a C programming to put that embedded C to basically put that into the controller. But nowadays, a lot of people doesn't just write a code manually, because there are a lot of toolboxes that take care of the code. All right, so you build a model, and for the code as well, there is some standards like MISRA compliances and stuff like that. So AutoSAR compliances as well. So basically, if you're able to build a model and you're able to use best use of the toolboxes, they basically take care of converting that model into a program generation. So once you're good with generating your algorithm, right, and then they're able to tell you that you have to convert that model into a code generation, right? That is what they're trying to tell you. And then they talk about also you should have an exposure to embedded C, because the code that has been generated should be interfaced into the controller environment, right? So that is what they're asking in terms of the embedded C. So, and then once everything is there, you should be able to perform testing. So a lot of testing happens within the environment of a software toolboxes itself, or sometimes the testing happens also in the Hill environment as well, or also the test will happen with a real-time battery pack integration as well. So this is what typically people are asking. You have to become battery management engineer, correct? So what you should focus if you want to be an engineer for battery management system. If you want me to run through some of the job roles and perspectives, like there are a few multiple things in the areas of BMS. BMS hardware is different. BMS software is different. BMS firmware is different. Connecting BMS to IoT is different, right? But we are talking about core of algorithms, right? Core of algorithms such as SOC, SOH, cell balancing, SOP estimation, and safety parameters for the batteries and stuff like that. So here, there's another company. They have posted a job here recently. There's been maybe closed for application, but it has been a very recent job posting as well. So good understanding of battery management systems and SOC, SOH algorithms, cell balancing techniques, software module interfaces, debugging problems, and life-changing algorithms. So designing and validating BMS hardware, optimized hardware design, be a development of firmware for scalable architecture, guided hardware for software team. And also, if you see a lot of repeated things, right? Simulink, Coder, C, all this Busmaster and stuff like that. This is I feel like this is literally for a job role which includes a hardware and a software as well. But typically, it happens in startups. Okay. It typically won't happen like this kind of a job profile of hardware and software in big OEMs or Tier 1 suppliers, because they're very specific on you want to be a software engineer, you want to be a firmware engineer, or you want to be a hardware engineer, all right? But when you go to a startup, obviously they may not have a lot of manpower to manage all of these things, but they would expect a lot of things from one or two people within the team itself. Similarly, I could just give you some more run through. There's a company called Log9. I think you might have all familiar and specialized in knowing this company as well. So they also have put up a job role. So if you go through and see through all these things, right? So what exactly do you see from perspective of this is, so let's go back again and look into this one. So define pack and cell level requirements, find the best options for product volume, weight, and runtime requirements, mechanical integration of cells, electrochemical components, and hardware, develop test validation plans to manufacture and characterizing battery packs, work with safety, reliability, blah, 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 manufacturability, and stuff like that. So also what here they're talking is that they're trying to talk an application point. It means they have a cells and they want to build a battery pack, and that is what this job role for. But if you still want to build a battery pack, you should also have a knowledge of cells, right, and electrochemical components as well. Because when you want to build a battery pack, and if you're in a team, part of a team who are developing a battery pack, obviously you should know whether the cell is going to be the right application for this and how does it behave and stuff like that. So just in case in some more job opportunities, which I kind of put across in the design of BMS and battery management system. So what I largely kind of tell and come back to everyone at this moment is uh, the core of battery management system is basically all about designing algorithms, right? So people would expect you to know the way you could create algorithms. So if you want to develop algorithms, right, so you have to be good in batteries first. So if you want to tell that, okay, this is how the SOC will be there after 100 cycles or not 200 cycles, right? So you should know what is happening inside the cell chemistry, right? It is not just measuring, your voltage at 100 cycle, right? It is not measuring with respect to different discharge currents. And it's not about just measuring the internal resistance of the cell. So it's lot more than that as a perspective. Basically, if you want to study that SOC as an estimation after a number of cycles, right? So it's really important for somebody to know the chemistry, construction, materials, and also be able to understand if the reactions are going on in this fashion, even to a level if you have an exposure of material construction and talk about a lot of points, maybe it's a dendroid formation, or talk about points like loss of active material, talk about points like corrosion of current collectors, or talk about points where there is a disintegration of active material from the current collector, maybe the adhesive systems are not properly functioning, and formation of kind of gases in the environment, or any byproducts of reaction. So all of these things are basically impacting the life of a cell. So you can't just put a resistance measuring device and then let's say, okay, yeah, I'm going to be telling my SOC going to be like this after 100 cycles. It's a very complex engineering inside of batteries and cells. So you should be able to have very good understanding of batteries at the electrochemical level, and having exposure to even know how the materials have been interacted inside after X number of cycles or Y number of cycles and stuff like that. So on top of all these things, you should be also having good amount of knowledge in the areas of cell testing and characterization, where you would be able to study how a cell behaves, how a cell behaves at various different conditions as well. So you should have a knowledge of behavioral studies of a cell, right? Then in addition to some of these points, it will be also good to have something called as characterization tests. There are specific tests that we perform like HPCC or DST or various different DCR, specific kind of tests that we perform to actually extract some parameters, to predict the algorithm through modeling approaches, right? So that's another area of learning and requirement. So once you have all these things and have a good solid ability to know what is a cell, what is things happening inside a cell, and how does it behave in different conditions and possibilities in place. So then you move to what you can call it as mathematical modeling of a cell, right? So you could perform mathematical modeling in Python as well. You could perform mathematical modeling in Octave, or even you can just write your own programs and embedded C and stuff like that. But preferably, people are using 1D simulation toolboxes. Let's take it as MATLAB, Altair, GTSuite, Ricardo. Many different toolboxes are available in the market today. Nothing to be specific that only this is the greatest toolbox, but they can be definitely industry adopted toolboxes as well. So they develop the model in that. So once they develop the model in that, and they will be able to validate the model within the environment. So they can check the model results and compare with the real-time test results to see how is your correlation of accuracy and stuff like that. So once you're being completed to the level of validation within the simulation environment and check whether your model is able to give you the realistic results in terms of simulations as well. So you bring the correlation together as much as possible, put all your influencing factors into the cell predictions and the estimation algorithms. So once you do that, you have to basically convert the model to a C code. So that is when embedded coder toolbox is coming into a picture. If it is a MATLAB, if it is some other toolboxes, there are different workbenches to convert a model into a C code, right? So if you take Scilab, they have Autos as a toolbox, and similarly, Altair has different toolboxes as well. Once you build that and you get a code, right? So you have to optimize the code possibly in scenarios. So you should know optimization process of code optimization things. And because you need to ensure that you are able to basically run the code in the shorter amount of time, and you don't want to have a very big and bulky code in place. It's all about C programming, embedded C and stuff like that, and knowing how we could make the code more and more simpler. On top of all these things, you also want the code to compliance with certain industry standards, right? Such as say MISRA and stuff like that. So you perform all these things. So at some point today, the toolboxes take care of all these things. All right. If you see any specific toolboxes in the industry, you could just try, like, I want to generate a code with respect to AutoSAR standards or MISRA standards. And you generate a code, it typically gets generated with respect to those standards itself. That's the advantage of tool language, take care of a lot of manual efforts in making that happen. So once you do that, then you perform still software in the loop, and then in progression to that, you could perform fill, which is processor in the loop, and you could have your controller, you could have your 1D simulation toolbox. You could make them interact together with a controller and also the computer in place. So make them work if the scenarios are functionally feasible. Then you go to a real-time implementation of Hill, right? So that is where you could have speed code, you could have hardware toolboxes like DSpace, you could have NI cards and stuff like that. You have toolboxes from ETAS, parent company is Bosch. So you could have those toolboxes, and that's where you validate. If you have enough amount of money, basically it costs a lot to buy these toolboxes. So once you've done all this validation, because an automotive, a lot of time will go for validation, because we don't want to just put stuff which doesn't work in all the conditions, right? It has to be reliable. That's a pretty important point, because in your house there's a mixer, and if something just got wrong with the mixer, I don't think so much will go. When you're mixing a chutney, if it just stops, it's just not much of a impact on the safety, right? So you may not have a good meal possibly, but except that you still do something else for that. But when you're going on a highway at 150 kilometers per hour, let's say if something that just shuts down, and all of you're gonna do is basically a few turnarounds of the car, and then possibly gonna impact life. So the code has to be highly reliable in nature, all right? So highly validated in nature. So that is where there's a lot of focus in terms of V-cycle to perform validation in the software development or in any other product development whole journey. So then we could actually test this all programs and validated in the virtual environments into real batteries, and then you could perform integration and then all the stuffs of taking to the complete proto level testing and complete product level testing and stuff like that. So if you see a whole journey, what I explained from a concept of batteries to implementation to the hardware, it is basically about largely about batteries, largely about toolboxes, largely about logic development, and also about embedded C and converting these models into validation systems, and also know some standards of developing these models, such as model-based standards or implementation within the toolbox itself, and then code generation and implementing the code into the real hardware and testing such as an hardware in place. So this is what a journey which takes care of development of a battery management system. As I said, some startups can just ask you to be good in everything, hardware, software, firmware, all this stuff. It is impossible for many people. Well understandable too. But there are some geeks, who are pretty good in everything. But if you take somebody who would just focus on, algorithms of code itself. So it depends upon the company where you want to explore your career. If it is a very, very beginning startup, or if it's a slowly establishing startup, they just want you everything. But if it is a well-established startup, then they just want not a startup OEM or a tier one, tier two supplier or engineering service company. They just want to focus on a very tiny little bit of a thing, and that is maybe you just develop SOC algorithms for, let's say, 3 years in place, right? You keep improvising them and stuff like that. So this is what whole journey, and this is where you could find opportunities as a BMS algorithm development. So this is something that I wanted to share it across to you, so that you get an idea on what exactly the life of battery management system is, and then what industry is expecting if you want to be a BMS engineer. So to make this happen and a cakewalk for engineers out there, so we mastered a program, and we curated a content around it, so that we create engineers. Possibly an engineering college cannot do it, or an MTech degree cannot do it, because it's too much diversified in what you want to learn. So we wanted to focus something very specific as algorithm development engineering, because if you take today, there is a lot of Indian companies looking forward to develop battery management system. Not just Indian companies. If you are very good at battery management algorithm, there are plenty of opportunities available for engineers, even in countries like Europe, countries like Sweden or US, or various other company places where there is an extensive amount of adoption is going on in terms of battery and electrifications and stuff like that. So that is keeping that as a focus for us, and bringing our exposure to batteries and our experiences in the battery management systems. So we wanted to kind of create a course that helps engineers. So we have done this course for about 9 months. It's a 36 weeks program. Okay, it's just equivalent to 2 to 3 years of experience that you could gain with 9 months of learning experience. So the journey of an engineer would start like this. I don't want to drag on much about this whole stuff, so but it's available on our website. Our team can share the details across to you. So this is a 9 months dedicated course to create engineers for specific job roles, such as BMS algorithm development, BMS testing, validation, and calibration, cell and pack testing engineers, BMS application engineers, and also virtual validation engineering, which happens either without having the real hardware itself within the simulation environment, or using other composite toolboxes. There's a lot of journey that we have brought it through this course. So as I said, you just can't match it with any MTech degree that may be available in any premier institutions with this course as well. So because it's very laser focused on one specific area of battery management system. So this is what we're trying to bring up through the whole content on module 1, completely on batteries and chemistries and stuff like that, so that you would know to the core of it that what is a battery is and how does it behave, its constructions, its materials, its internal structures of at a molecular levels and stuff like that, and what happens when you try to use a battery over time. So that's the intention of the module 1. And module 2 talks about the testing. We have this facility available in Bangalore in our office. So we are letting the people who are joining the courses to actually get a hands-on with this equipment, because that's quite important. You just don't know everything with theory, right? So you basically sit with this equipment, and that's why we have 35% of this course happening offline. This cannot be done at your house, right? Because these equipments are quite expensive. And along these equipments, we also have environmental chambers where you could study the behavior of a cell at various different temperatures and environmental conditions and stuff like that. So that's the focus area of this course, that where a learner would have a complete knowledge in practical way as well. So these are the similar hardware that is available in various different industries. So even if you know how to use this equipment, so you basically have an edge over somebody else who may not even know what is this equipment, how does it work. So our team of participants would spend a lot of time on this module where an extensive number of tests are conducted at different discharge rates, charge rates, characterization types, and various different temperature environments, different chemistries, a lot of different charging cycles, discharging profiles, and stuff like that. So then we go and start working with the real hands-on with battery management systems, where we talk about using some industry-grade controller development boards from TI, NXP, and Infineon, and where you can actually work on these systems and understand how do they function, what is the requirement behind this system, so how do we create these documents of requirement analysis, how do we develop this from the requirement documents to the product engineering in place. That's what happens largely in this, and you could just try to involve yourself more to get an hands-on experience. Then in slowly moving to the further areas, we talk about algorithm development core. So you could use specific toolboxes like 1D modeling simulation toolboxes. So you could learn on core of algorithm development, which is SOC, SOH, various other cell balancing parameters and stuff like that. And slowly the course get more intensive, that you would be able to learn model management and stuff like that, and the code generation within the environment of toolboxes, and then putting those code into the real hardware and conducting experiments on those real hardware as well, then gaining an exposure to the industry requirements in place. So this is the whole way how this course starts, and we have a program starting on 16th of May. That is when this course is starting, and we're just gonna have 5 people for this batch. So we don't want to create X number of engineers and make them unemployable. So our intention is to just be very focused to ensure that we just take few people and then we train them to ensure that they can have career opportunities. Typically, this course is not open for all. This course is for somebody who have a very good amount of, at least a good amount of exposure and a passion and interest towards batteries and chemistry and algorithms and stuff like that. There are some prerequisites. So basically, yeah, this is a pricing structure that we have for the program. So if you're a fresher and you want to enter into the battery industry, or if you're a working professional and you don't want a placement from our side, but you just want to learn and upskill yourself and get into the other job role. So the course fees is basically 1.2 lakhs. That is inclusive of GST. It's almost about 1 lakh plus GST. And if somebody is just looking forward to begin their whole journey with a placement opportunity, it's 1,80,000. That is split across 12 EMIs in place. Great. So now I showed you a journey of technicality of BMS development, from the concept of chemistry to the complete journey of implementation of the BMS algorithms in place. So over to you guys. If you have any questions on the chat box, so I would be very glad to take those questions and give anything final across to those questions. So any specific questions from anyone? Oh, great. So I see some questions popping up here. All right, so it's from our team. Cool. Anybody have any questions to ask about? You can just go back and try to see if there's any questions from somebody on the live chat. Great. So yeah, in the meantime, if you have any questions, over to you. So I would be glad to answer anything to my knowledge. Great. So not much right now on the screen. Cool. Anybody have any questions about how you possibly can take up something in the BMS? And it's not that you should just take a course to make something happen, but if you guys have any questions in place, you could just throw it out. Job opportunities for BE automotive versus BE electronics. Great. So this is somewhere it just get tricky. Today, knowing something multidisciplinary is really, really important. Okay, so if you see 2 sides of the things I explained, one is on batteries, chemistries, electrochemistry, testing, understanding the batteries and characterizing them, and then on the other side, developing algorithms, but at the end, implementing those algorithms with a C code as a part of it, right? So to a journey till your 70% doesn't require you to know C programming, right? So, but and the rest of the journey would require you to have programming knowledge as well. So if you're a person who have an exposure to programming too, it's just fantastic, right? It's just super amazing. You have you as a part of the team because you're a right fit for the team, all right? But yeah, if you're not, then it's all right in certain cases, because not every industry who puts a job roles like this would expect you to know everything. Okay, it's quite impossible, truly, sometimes, to just find somebody who just know every single thing that they ask in the whole profile. It is, I think that's their very core interest, to just put everything that they want. But yeah, it's quite impossible always to have everything. But if you're able to match like 60% of what they're asking, I think you're quite competent. So in that side of it, if I tell you, like, that's the good side of the downside. If somebody's an electronics engineer, he may not know a lot of things on behavior studies, chemistries, and stuff like that. That we may be quite stronger as an automotive engineers. But on the other side, they're quite good at embedded C. But yeah, maybe at a point of it, and two people would just merge each other and just take care of the journey in place. If you talk about what opportunities are there, if you know embedded programming, then you're quite competent, similar to an electronics engineer being an automotive engineer. But a guy from electronics, if he or she can competently learn same as other guys, so on batteries and chemistry, so both are in the same line of focus. So I think, Anup, I might have given you an idea on opportunities versus automotive and electronics guys. This is, I was trying to explain you with the batteries, but that may be quite different for different job roles and stuff like that. Okay, there is another question from Anupam. What a mechanical engineer must do to excel in the field of BMS engineering, and which somewhere to electrical electronics engineering? Oh, I think, Anupam, you might have gotten slightly wrong that mechanical engineer is not something in the areas of BMS, right? If you take somebody from electrical and electronics, it would be quite difficult for them to understand how a temperature can impact the battery's life, how a temperature does impact the capacity retention of the cell, or how a temperature is impacting the power output capability of the cell, right? But I'm a mechanical engineer, though I'm just able to correlate with you. So we would understand more from the perspective of what is a cell, how does it behave. So, we were studying structures of internal material structures in our college days. You have studied the phase changing diagrams of martensite and different iron phase formations, right? So you understand more, at least compared to electrical electronics engineers. So that's the core area where it is. Knowing batteries is very important, right? And then on top of it, making algorithms or models in toolboxes like MATLAB, Altair, and other toolboxes. You can also do it because it's all equations and mathematics in place, right? So, but when it comes to, as I said, algorithms, so which is basically coding, right? So that is where we are slightly weaker at. So that's where the guys from electrical electronics are stronger at. So right now, focus on your core strength, that is knowing batteries, understanding of batteries, developing algorithms in 1D toolboxes, developing them better, calibrating them. So if you're very good at that, you just not so good at one area, that is programming, right? So it means you can basically fit to the job role of BMS. If you can learn a bit of programming, why not, right? So you could prepare yourself and explore and be competitive than anybody as other electronics and electrical engineering guys as well. Cool. I hope I answered your question. Right. So BMS is not just for electrical guys and electronics guys. You just have to understand. So don't think like it looks green, which is like a PCB, that's just not meant for you, right? So a lot of control system engineering is involved. A lot of other areas of domains are involved. That is what we study at college days to develop these batteries. So absolutely, the end, it just goes as a C, right? So that's what your controller understands. But yeah, except that, everything else can be developed by the team as well. Cool. You guys, any questions from anyone at the last? So Cool. I would like to know and get honest feedback from you that, I'm sure, I was not able to get you a job in battery management systems. It's quite impossible that I could do in 1 hour. So let me know if the session was useful for you to figure out there is something like BMS, and I can also do this as a mechanical engineer or an automotive engineer or an electrical engineer or electronics engineer. That's fairly sufficient. And I just put a path on, okay, do this, and then you are competitive to get a job. And there is no guarantee in the world that you will get a job, but it's quite optimistic to tell that. But yeah, you could definitely explore. How frequently BMS manufacturers change BMS algorithms? Fantastic question. So, okay, first and foremost thing, the calibration of BMS is a lifetime journey. Okay, it just doesn't stop when you have a product, right? If you have read a article that has been put across by Battery, the company who recalled about 2,000 vehicles, right? I think they recalled about 2,000 Pluto vehicles. They were mentioning about parameters of imbalanced cells, right? The parameters of something is not working in their algorithms, right? So when a product is released into the market, it doesn't mean that your BMS is just awesome, right? So it is not just one-time activity. It is a continuous process when you talk about calibration. So you do as much as possible at your factory, right? So, but on the real field, there are a lot of problems that your vehicle is going to face. So you collect a lot of data, you mature your model, you try to just perform certain over-the-air updates and stuff like that. So this is just happening all across your life cycle, even after releasing your product, right? And when the product is in the market. So this is there everywhere, okay? Then on top of these things, it's just not set true that, this, guys are going to only use one type of chemistry, right? So today you're going to use an NMC because that's great. And in next 1 year, you would have a new chemistry in place, right? So you just can't stick to that and go, hey, I'm going to use NMC means that's my life. You would never do that, right? So you want to have a better chemistry, reliable chemistry, high performance, charge cycles and all these things. So what you do, you basically switch your chemistry into something else. It is not just like this, but yeah, there is a lot of process in place, but you find a validating customer who supplies a better chemistry. So, you're going to just shove up all of the product development of algorithms in place. So this is a journey. So it's just not a one-time efforts to create one algorithm and that just work for everything. So you just change your chemistry, it's going to change a lot of stuff inside the algorithms, right? So this is in a process which just keeps happening, either for an OEM or for a Tier 1 suppliers, because this is a development phase, right? So if you talk about engines as well, right? How long engines? More than 100 years. But don't you see still there are engineers performing calibrations? Companies that keep hiring calibration engineers. Even you see there are people hiring diesel calibration engineers, right? So that means that is still going on as a job in the market. So it's just a continuous process of product development and the journey where you have to be there as an algorithm engineer to make things happen always rightly. And something changes, again, you do it from the start. If something changes, you do it from the start. So it's a continuous process of development. Cool. Great. Fantastic question, Anup. I'm very happy to see that kind of a mature questions from participant side. Great. Any other questions for the last call? So if not, I would end up my session. I believe this was useful for you. I believe at least it was informative to some extent for you to explore opportunities in BMS or gain some thoughts and that you can be a BMS engineer. So definitely the world don't want everybody to be a BMS engineer, right? So somebody who's very passionate to become a BMS engineer. So we are very happy to help people here and there. All right, so there's one more question at last. So skill set difference between BMS hardware and software. So yeah, this is completely like two sides of the coin, right? So the BMS hardware talks about it would be very deep of selection of controller for your application, right? to build up all your peripherals around your microcontroller, building all our interfacing devices. Maybe it's sensors, maybe it's communication protocols, maybe it's interfacing with anything else, maybe it's IoT and stuff like that. So what you do as an hardware engineer, you basically make that green color board, right, which is just basically the PCB. And you ensure that all of this board works reliably, and you take care of signal processing things, you take care of signal filtering things, and you design your circuitries around to make the BMS work, right? It's a hardware thing, which you can see and touch and feel. So software is something which you cannot touch and see and feel, but it is something there as an algorithm. So that is totally a different thing from hardware side. The hardware is all about, as I said, the green PCB and the components around it. It could be simple as, you're gonna put a let's say 240-volt connection to BMS, right? So, but your controller works at 3.4 volts or 5 volts. You're just gonna burn the whole controller if you just put anywhere between the 440 volts or to the controller. So you do a lot of power electronics and conversions in place to supply it to the controller. You do a lot of conversions between to supply your sensors. A lot of these things happen to the hardware design. Okay, so that's my answer. Great. So thank you. I think I was useful in answering that question. I think I brought some clarity in the answer in place. Okay, so that sounds interesting. Good questions from everyone. By the way, perfect if that's something I could wind up the session with. But thanks a lot, everyone, for participating in the session. Glad to interact with you. We are there to help from Decibels if you are interested to build your career. I think we are the only company in India who have course on specialization for 9 months on battery management system, and we're very quite proud to have that in place. And very happy to contribute from our side to electrification sector to grow great and have great engineers to work in technology. So, by the way, thanks a lot, everyone. And if you have no questions, we'll wind up the session for now.